evening, everybody. I can't even tell you how nice it is to not have to go and shut off the air conditioner before the webcast. We're in the 70s this evening. We've got 78.3 right now. And this is a look at the clouds outside a little bit earlier. And I don't know if you followed the animation, but you can see three main cloud layers. They're kind of differentiated there by texture and by direction of movement. So some of them are moving towards the northeast and some are moving towards the east there. All right, let's head into the charts here. We've got a little bit of weather going on. Not necessarily here in the central U.S., but elsewhere. This is showing the temperature anomaly. This is kind of like this in fact is the departure from normal. And we can see things are running below normal across much of the central and eastern U.S. Still a heat wave plaguing British Columbia here in Washington. And that goes all the way up into the Yukon and Alaska. Also a heat wave up in Siberia where they don't need it due to the methane deposits there. And cooler than normal in the European area right there. But man, looks like a heat wave across the Sahara and, of course, parts of Australia. We have a little bit of a tropical storm going on in Japan right now. Let me bring up that chart. There it is. You can see it off to the top left there. It looks like Noru crossing the island of Honshu, and we can see that on the Japanese radar network. And this is kind of what you get there for Japan when you're trying to view radar data. I don't know of any better sources. But obviously this is reprocessed data, so it's not like the raw images we get here in the United States. But we can see some of that remains of an old typhoon there crossing the island. And down in the Caribbean, we've got a system of our own, and you can see it crossing the coast onto around the Mexican Yucatan Peninsula and Belize, located right here. And this is just a tropical storm. It's kind of moving in this direction. And the stronger winds, of course, when you couple the circular winds around the storm with the forward motion, this is going to be the area of stronger winds, especially right in this area right here. Trying to figure out a color that shows up good, maybe green. Okay, so that's kind of like the area of peak winds, so we're talking about south of Cozumel and Cancun. This, however, like I said, is a tropical storm. Winds are sustained 60 miles an hour, so yeah, that is up there, but it's not, this kind of puts us probably, that's definitely down below the hurricane strength. So that's going to continue moving into the Bay of Campeche. Looks like the GFS has handled that pretty well. So that's just going to move into the interior of Mexico and begin dissipating. And we'll check the precipitable water and see if we get some of the moisture. Maybe this is a good time to do that. See if I can bring up the precipitable water charts. So I'm going to go to GFS and select precipitable water. And hopefully this doesn't disrupt the feed here. Yeah, I'm really hoping it doesn't. This is a lot of charts it has to download here. But this is data coming down rather than up to the server, so we'll probably be okay here. All right, let's look at the chart sequence, and then I'll give you the legend up at the top. So, you can see it off. Well, no, you can't. I'll just have to tell you. Actually, let me see if I can shrink the map here. I think that'll work out pretty well there. Okay, so bringing this forward, We can see our tropical storm there moving into the Bay of Campeche. And we're looking at precipitable water, which is kind of like the sum of all the water vapor from the surface up to the stratosphere. And it probably considers the top of the domain, which is probably about 10 millibars. That's probably up at about 100,000 feet. But there's very little moisture up in the stratosphere that's important. So the main focus here is on the troposphere. So, trying to figure out what happens to the... Yeah, I guess a lot of the moisture gets carried northward here into Texas and disperses, and some of it ends up, I think, on the other side there. I'm not sure if that's a separate system. But in any case, we're not seeing a whole lot of very intense moisture coming from the remains of that storm. However, precipitable waters will be up at about the 1.5-inch range. Okay. Then later in the week we see actually after the weekend we see another front coming south and dry air coming from Canada. So that's just kind of a preview of what's going to happen next week. And this is one very cool site you can go to now that we're getting into hurricane season. This is called tropicalatlantic.com. They've got a models site here for the tropical cyclones and hurricanes. And you can essentially click on them, and there's all kinds of data here. A lot of it collected from the models and other data from the reconnaissance planes. So if you want to get an idea of the error, you can go to this NHC model error, for example. And this will give you some different graphics to look at. So, okay. Those links aren't really coming up there, so a little bit of a problem. But intensity diagrams, we can give that a try. Pressure. And there we go. So this gives you an idea of the forecast intensity, and we see the pressures dropping quite a bit as the system emerges into the Bay of Campeche there. After crossing the Yucatan, you can see the weakening right there. And then we're looking at about the 54-hour point. This is going to be, I guess, about Wednesday afternoon. We have this CTX model, for example. That's from the Navy. And that goes with a much more strong system. And then we have the other outliers like the NAM. And the NAM, I guess by itself, it probably doesn't have very good modeling of tropical systems. But the more specialized models, those are kind of in the middle. Like the HWRF right there. Pretty much right in the center. So we can pretty much count on central pressures to be in the 990 through 995 millibar range. Okay, as far as what's happening in Texas, we've got kind of a quiet day here. And I remember the Weather Service was looking for a lot of extensive precip. We had flash flood watches expected for this area here. And interestingly, that was because I was looking at the forecaster talking about that, and he was very skeptical of the models. And he was thinking they weren't really going to handle things well and that we would have a significant flash flood risk. And apparently it worked out the other way. The models actually did have a fairly good handle on things. So very scattered precip through the area. Let's see if we can put up sea level pressure, do something different here. And we see the high pressure moving in from the northern plains right there. We can put on moisture too, theta E. That's where the atmosphere supports convection the best. And we see kind of a bad value right there. But elsewhere, we see kind of a ridge through this area here. Actually, is that a ridge? No, this is kind of a plateau here. So we have the air mass offshore here. Very good theta E's offshore, obviously. And then in this area here, an area of moderate theta E's, for example. So that's kind of how we read the chart. And then we have a theta E ridge coming into the higher terrain of New Mexico right there. That's supporting the upslope and orographic storms in that region. So that's a look at what's happening. We've got the new front pushing southward. And I'm not too sure where the leading edge on that is. It's probably well to the south, maybe something like that right there. And then in the middle, we've probably got some outflow boundaries for this area. So we can use that deformation product to kind of get a quick look at the boundaries. And it looks like the most likely area for outflow boundaries is going to be kind of in this region right there. So probably kind of a meso high probably in this area here from Shreveport down to Austin. So we're going to look for that on the charts. And then we pick up the synoptic scale high further to the north. Okay, not much in the way of thunderstorm activity elsewhere except for Mississippi and the Baton Rouge area of Louisiana. A little bit of an MCS, and we talked about MCSs yesterday. I guess the best place to look on that's going to be on the College DuPage site. I'll go to their 1 kilometer radar mosaic. Okay, so there's a look at our MCS. Not really anything severe in there. And we can animate the radar here, which is a really neat tool. So this goes back about an hour and a half to the current time. And one thing that's kind of interesting here, you can see the bit of a sun spike right there. Actually, no, that's the wrong direction. That looks like some interference. This time of the year, the sun is to the west-northwest still. So we would expect to find those in that direction. So who knows what that is. Okay, moving ahead to, I guess we'll do the satellite and then go through some of the chat. There's a look at the visible imagery for the current time there. And you can see the old MCS departing into southeast Texas and Louisiana there. Okay, David Moore joining us, first one on, looking at the GO 16 today. Very chaotic cloud movement over Texas. Dumping ground for fronts and boundaries. Got Ryan Toomey's here and Michael O. It's been rainy and cool in Memphis. We have Eddie W. and Fun with Tech. Alexi and Burl H. Carl Berghoff sent me an email, and my email is still behind. It really piled up over the weekend, so I'm still working through that. But I'll have to take a look at that separately from the webcast. Yucatan bracing for Frank from Ryan there. Got a couple of interesting emojis there. Kevin McKinney, summer has been a nice contrast to last year in this mid-southeast. Michael Burrell joining us, and he says it's interesting to see what the cold front brings into Georgia tomorrow morning. We have David Holcomb here and Dwayne Ward tracking the mid-Atlantic, multiple tornado warnings on the Delmarva, 1 EF1 tornado in that area. Justin Pulliam's here, and his parents took a bad lightning strike north of Dallas yesterday. I remember back in the old days I had a Commodore 64, and I had to replace my sound chip on that Commodore 64 like 3 times due to lightning strikes in the area. Haven't had any problems with my present computers because I've got everything on an UPS. So I definitely recommend looking for one of those if you don't have an UPS. Those will save your devices. Michael O asks, what's been driving the troughiness in the East U.S.? Well, we don't really know for sure what's causing that. We just know that there's a very persistent planetary scale pattern where we have long waves persisting in the eastern U.S. and a ridge to the west. Underneath that ridge, of course, we have the wildfires in British Columbia, way out in this area here. So I really don't have an answer for you. It's probably tied to sea surface temperatures and just the prevailing flow and everything. Alexei mentioning a ton of rain there. Mike asks, what are we using to show the sea level pressure? That's going to be the College of DuPage site. That's what we showed earlier. Rainy and 57 in Denver. From Mike Estwick there. And just going quickly through the rest of the messages. Carl Berghoff mentions the spike off the radar caused by beam scattering through the atmospheric column at sundown. Happens at sunrise with a lot of moisture. Alexei is talking with somebody about classes, with Carl. And Justin says if he was to go for another degree, he would consider online too. Yeah, I looked at some of that online stuff, and I know at least 5 or 10 years ago there was a problem with the reputation of some of those online places, but I guess some of the accredited regular schools are doing that, so I'll have to look into that myself. Okay, so you've looked at this for a while, the visible imagery. Water vapor looking like this. Looks like some definite MCS activity way down in Mexico. But basically we're seeing cool systems sinking southward through the U.S. And basically a front working its way southward through the Gulf. And as we go further south, we can see Frank there. At least I think that was Frank. Yep, Franklin. Okay, it was close. Okay, the 250 millibar chart showing that persistent flow that we've seen most of the summer with the trough to the east and the ridge to the west. And that ridge there, that's been responsible for a lot of the wildfires there in British Columbia. That sets up a subsidence pattern which causes adiabatic warming and lower humidities. Both of those are very important in setting the stage for wildfires in that area. And then out to the east there, we can see the Hudson Bay vortex. This is more kind of an open trough there, but there's a low right there over Quebec and the jet stream located right in that area. So we can take a closer look with the 200 millibar chart. Looks a lot like yesterday with 100 knot flow over New York there at 40,000 feet. Polar front jet moving through that area, and then I think over California here, I guess that could be more of a subtropical jet here. 60 knot flow up there at 200 millibars. And then we can see down at 500 millibars, we lose a lot of the stronger flow. So that's one of the hallmarks there of a subtropical jet. Okay, for soundings, let me get this set up first here. For soundings, I did do one thing a little bit different. I took the Fort Worth sounding and I compared it with Sunday morning's, yesterday's sounding. And I got this here. So this is a 24-hour sounding change. So the red is going to be yesterday's sounding during the morning, and then black is today for this morning. So what we see here is a cooler atmosphere with lower lapse rates. We don't have the instability that we had yesterday, and we can see that we've got a little less moisture. And that's probably due to some of this northerly component that we see there, a little bit of a northeast flow showing for today, especially up in the mid-levels. So this air in the mid-levels, that's kind of northwesterly, bringing some of the warmer air from the ridge into the area, and so that gives us a little bit of warm air aloft there at about 15 to 20,000 feet. And you can see a little inversion right there. And so just beneath it, that's going to be a very concentrated area for cloud development. If we get any clouds forming, they'll tend to rise, and they'll tend to stratify at that layer, and that's going to be about 15,000 feet. So that's one thing that's given us a lot of that cloud. Let me see if I can show you that. So you see there's quite a bit of that cloudiness aloft. It's going to be that layer right there. That's the altostratus and altocumulus up at about 17 or 18,000 feet. And then down lower we see more of the convective elements. And there would be a lot more of those if the air mass was warmer. So that's what's going on across Texas. Then we'll head back to the charts here. Okay, let's take a look at the smoke here, see what that's doing, because it's been going... Wow, that's a nice MCS there in Brazil. Or is that Venezuela? I think that's going to be around Guyana and Suriname. Let me see if I can put up the borders. Yeah, that looks like eastern Venezuela there. So we'll zoom this out right here and bring up the smoke product. Okay, we've got the usual dust plume coming off of West Africa. That's feeding out into the Atlantic with the easterly flow from the tropics. From the Bermuda High there, around the Bermuda High. That's the trade winds, basically. And we see some more smoke here in the Mexican region. And looks like we've had a little bit of I guess we've seen some dispersal of all that smoke there in British Columbia with this next system coming on. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, see, something isn't looking right. I realized we've got old data here. I was like, man, where's the smoke? And then I saw we were looking at... let me see if I can shrink this down. Yeah, we're looking at June 7th. Okay, that was a stupid error, so we'll bring this up to August 7th, the current date, and we will see a much different picture. And there's all the smoke there across Oregon, down to Idaho, and then all the way up to southern and central British Columbia. And I was looking at some of the webcams earlier. Let me see if I can bring one up. Okay, well, hopefully this doesn't take too long. Portland camera. Yeah, these webcam sites are giving me some trouble here. Let's see, I probably don't want to use Weather Underground since that's probably proprietary stuff there, but I'm going to try this Grants Pass webcam. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Grants Pass, that's going to be in southwest Oregon in the Medford area. Wow, that's a lot of smoke there, and we're probably looking about maybe 5 to 7 miles out in that valley right there. Obviously, that's the sun up there, so we're looking to the west-northwest. So we'll go back to the smoke product, or the aerosol optical depth. In Grants Pass, that's going to be right in this area here. So not much to disperse that pattern, and we've got that big area of ridging across that area, so there's nowhere for it to go. It's continuing to sit there, and it's probably underneath a bit of a subsidence inversion. All right, it's probably time to head into the models, so we'll do that. We'll start out by looking at the mesoscale model forecast. And taking a quick look at chat here, a little discussion about Mississippi State. And yeah, they've got a good program there, and they use some of my books there in their program. Mississippi State University. Good place there. And Michael O says the polar jet has been fairly strong this summer. And Alexi says we're still hazy down in Killeen, Texas. Yeah, we've had a little bit of smoke come down from British Columbia. Not much, but some of it has filtered down into this area. Okay, we can see the pressure gradient across North Texas and Oklahoma. So in other words, pressure rises as we go to the north. So that's the cool air mass filtering southward. So for tonight, what's going to happen with the precipitation? Looks like it's going to disperse, but one little area gets going around Houston. Yeah, it looks like a little bit of a mesoscale vortex there. Maybe centered about right here. That might be that old vortex from yesterday's storm. Maybe it's drifted southeastward. But anyway, it looks like kind of a quiet night, except for that area near Houston. And then tomorrow, on the last frame, we can see the redevelopment there in East Texas. So probably more storms there for that part of the state. Across the U.S. itself, there's that MCS there in Mississippi. The model is missing a little bit of that detail in Louisiana. Not showing much of the convective elements there. But for tonight, looks like the model has that dissipating and then redevelopment out there near Houston. And then for, let's see here, where are we at? For tomorrow afternoon, looks like we get some development. Yeah, right there around south of Shreveport towards Lufkin. Otherwise, pretty quiet across the entire country. And then the next day, going into Wednesday, very quiet there also. In fact, all we've got pretty much is upslope storms there in Colorado. And of course, the tropical storm making landfall way down in Mexico, way off to the bottom of the chart. Okay, so let's check out what's going to happen over the next week or two. And I think now that Pivotal Weather has 384-hour charts, we'll be able to look at eclipse forecasts. So let's bring it forward. Okay, things pretty much dominated by high pressure in the northern plains. And that'll just kind of push out all the precip down into the Gulf. The high kind of expands tomorrow for the webcast tomorrow night. And then for Wednesday, We see the high kind of merging in with the Bermuda high there on the east coast. So we see kind of a easterly, southeasterly flow on the coast. New system coming out of Canada right there. Then for Thursday, we see very slow progress with that system in Canada, coming out of Canada. It's right there around Minneapolis, trailing in down there through Denver. And we can see some storms get going for Thursday night. Looks like a bit of an MCS there in Kansas. Then for Friday, the system continues slowly sagging southward. There's the leading edge. There's that high pressure area. Then for the weekend, for Saturday, there's the leading edge of that cold air mass. So definite storms for southwestern Kansas and eastern Colorado where we have the upslope. Then for Sunday, looks like it starts building southward again. So that'll drive the precip southward once again to the Gulf. High pressure builds in, and now we're looking at the run-up towards the eclipse. So we'll just have high pressure in place, and around the periphery of that, showers from Florida to Texas. And then for the eclipse weather, what we see here on the night before is lots of low pressure up to the north and high pressure to the east. So things across the U.S. will be dominated by the Bermuda high. And it looks like we have a little bit of a frontal system moving through the northern plains. Then this is going to be the weather at the time of the eclipse. So things pretty much dominated by the Bermuda high there. And I think what we're probably looking at is some very good viewing weather. I don't see any big problems. However, I've pointed out back on that August 1st webcast, possible stagnation there in Tennessee, Kentucky. So I would probably look for a little bit of enhanced cloudiness in that area. I would be a little bit nervous being around the Nashville area until we get closer. Looks like probably a few breaks there in the Carolinas. Some definite fair weather in the Great Plains. Let me draw the track of that eclipse. Okay, then we may see other problems possible in Nebraska with that warm air advection pattern right here. Yeah, right there, that's going to be the warm air advection pattern. So we've always got to pay attention to that. No big systems in the Rockies, Oregon, in fact, Idaho, those all look pretty good. However, there may still be smoke problems at that point. So that's a very quick look at what we're expecting. Let me see if they have any cloud products here. I don't see any cloud products here, but we can use the 700 millibar relative humidity to kind of get an idea. Trying to figure out a good way to bring this up without killing the stream. Okay. Let me try this. I'm going to try... Okay, I was trying to select one of the images here and put it in a separate window and then change the URL. I'm probably not going to be able to do that, so we'll just kind of take a look at this tomorrow. But I don't really see any problems. It looks actually fairly good for most of the U.S., except for possible smoke up there in the northwest and maybe some areas of clouds along the Appalachians, and then, of course, that warm air advection pattern in the north-central U.S. Okay, so that's probably all I have here. Alexi says, please don't forget to hit that like button, and I do appreciate that. Share to your friends the webcast. And hopefully we can get more people in here over the next month or two as we start beginning the run-up to fall. Also hurricane season coming in here. Ryan mentioning EF2 tornado on Sunday morning. I don't have the charts for that, so I can't really discuss that at this point. But that might be good for a kind of retrospective program. We might be able to take a look at that. Okay, so that's about all I got for tonight. I hope you all have a good webcast. Sorry, I'm trying to read at the same time. I'm seeing where Michael O is talking about that forest fire smoke. All right. Anyway, that's about all I have for tonight. Have a good evening, guys, and we will see you tomorrow.